This is Iolia Zane speaking. Uh, Before I begin, I want to apologize to everyone in advance and Dr. Walker for my inability to present on Monday. I unfortunately had a sore throat and I wasn't able to speak clearly and articulate my sentences in a manner that is understandable to any normal human ear. So just want to apologize in advance for the inconveniences this may have caused. However, moving on, today I am here to present my project, Does Religion Foster Generosity? So the motivation behind this research topic was mainly due to my personal experiences from transitioning from a white dominant community where I mainly went for high school to a more multicultural setting like here at the University of Michigan. This also moves on to my second point where I was kind of like intrigued whether or not religion fosters generosity simply from observing the actions and behaviors of others. Everybody here comes from a different background, different state. Some of us are even internationals here. And I just found it particularly interesting at times, just, from meeting people, seeing people, and just, getting a vibe as to how different cultures and people of different backgrounds interact with one another and how they present themselves. And lastly, it's just witnessing how the different religious organizations on campus interact with the surrounding communities. So for the first religion of our observation, we will be looking at Christianity, particularly Roman Catholicism, the biggest branch in the Christian church, which possesses 1 billion followers and counting in modern day. The works cited that I have listed here is by Mary L. Maples. Her book, Public Charity, Religion, and Social Welfare in Indianapolis. And this book essentially documents the measures the Catholic Church in the Indianapolis region took, particularly focusing on their efforts during the Great Depression. And the book also talks heavily about other Catholic archdioceses or Catholic districts outside of Indianapolis, such as that of Chicago and New York, respectively. The case study here goes to show a scenario where religion didn't necessarily influence or foster generosity. So in this instance, in the light of the challenge, the workers at the Catholic Charities decided that they were no longer able essentially to sustain their efforts and that it should be the role of the government to aid those who are homeless and unemployed. Moving on to the next topic, we will be covering about Islam, the second biggest religion, and the Sunni Muslim branch, which is the biggest population in Islam. So the observed population here mainly focuses on a sample of 600 Sunni Muslims, those specifically who partook in the post-Arab Spring elections in Tunisia back in the 2010s. This specific population is useful in identifying the benefits of being a citizen in a country where just about every single person belongs to the same religious group. So under this scenario, generosity can be measured more easily with the elimination of third variables in existence of other religions, such as in the Indianapolis case, because in the Americas there is always more than one religion present, so that could lead to a conflict. And just on a side note, for anyone who's unfamiliar with what the Arab Spring was, it was a series of anti-government protests and uprisings that spread across much of the Arab world due to the power of social media and Twitter in the early 10s. Mainly was a response to decades of corruption and economic stagnation in the regions. So by utilizing this study, particularly this case, the main characters include the poor and affluent voters who are voting for a religiously affiliated political party called Ennahda, and it was identified through the study by Ferrati. Everyone essentially belongs to the same team. The effects of generosity are heavily determined by socioeconomic characteristics. And to also provide context of the majority of the voters, they mainly came from poor economic backgrounds because the Anahata regime pledged to implement and favored the poor through heavy taxations on the rich. And this is also due to the poor economic conditions that the majority of Tunisia was suffering through in 2010. Before this election, Tunisia's poverty rate was flying at around 31.1%, which was an 11% decline from what it was in 2005 at 42.1% and 51.2% in 2000. So, if you want to put this in a bigger perspective, in 2010, the richest 20% of Tunisia owned roughly almost 50% of the total income of the country. Just from these statistics alone, generous, then why is it a country where 99% of the population belongs to the same religion, yet more than half peoples live in a state of poverty, while the ruling class owns almost half the nation's entire national income? The last group here that we'll analyze are secular groups, and this is just to give a little compare and contrast to those who are obviously before religious and these who aren't. So the experiment that we'll be utilizing here to identify this would be Darley and Batson's From Jerusalem to Jericho experiment conducted in 1970. So in this experiment, Darley and Batson want to see whether or not someone who is being religiously educated for a religious profession compared to someone who is just being educated in college would be more likely to stop on their way to a lecture to help a random homeless man that they would place along their path. And essentially what Darley and Batson found in the end was that religious affiliation made no significant difference in the likelihood of giving the victim help. And yeah.
America. Okay? You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Final thoughts. Purpose of these situations were to highlight and note parts of the stories as to what drives human generosity and charitable actions. From these findings, when resources are adequate, people are willing to give, but scenarios where resources are scarce, such as in Tunisia and Indianapolis, the tables turn and gaps appear. And lastly, based on the individual, it's based on the individual that heavily determines whether or not they decide to show charity, as demonstrated through the Darley and Batson experiment. Well, that's it. I appreciate you all, if you guys even clicked on the video, for listening to me talk. Again, I never got to say, I want to apologize again for being unable to make this presentation on time during our Zoom call. But for anyone who's gotten this far in this video, again, I greatly appreciate you. Wish you guys best of luck to you in your future endeavors. Go Blue.